It could be worse is a heck of a re-election slogan, but that's basically what Democratic Governor Jared Polis is saying today with the news out that health insurance premiums are going up significantly in Colorado next year. Coloradans on small business and individual plans will be paying more, but they would be paying even larger premiums than that without the Polis administration's reinsurance program bringing down costs. The state's Division of Insurance has approved next year's insurance rates, and the state says that their administration's actions will save $326 million on individual health insurance premiums next year. Republicans and health insurers accurately note that the individual rates will be increasing by an average of 7%, while the small group rates are going up 10%. The savings over what insurance premiums could have been is from reinsurance. That allows insurance companies to split liability with a third party and keep rates lower. So while some Coloradans are going to be facing their largest insurance rate hike in years, the nonprofit Colorado Consumer Health Initiative told us the premiums would be about 32% higher if the state did not have reinsurance. A health insurance industry group told our partners at the Colorado Politics that Polis administration chose politics over math.
And of course, you should not be listening to insurers or hospitals or providers or pharma companies, because they're the ones that are on the gravy train making the money.
That was the governor's reaction when I asked him about that today. Polis also pointed to higher premium increases than Colorado and some neighboring states. Also in our conversation today, the governor was pretty unequivocal. He does not want to mandate the COVID vaccine for school kids in Colorado. His Republican opponent, Heidi Ganahl, has been out suggesting that Polis secretly wants to mandate the vaccine for children. Based on what we know now about the virus and the vaccine, do you want to see it mandated for Colorado school kids?
No, absolutely not. It's a recommendation from the CDC, and I want to make sure people know that I took that recommendation before they even issued it. I got my kids vaccinated. And I encourage parents to look at the data, to get their kids vaccinated. I agree with that recommendation. But of course, we also value freedom in Colorado.
So just a reminder about a final debate that we've got coming up before Election Day. An unprecedented series of 6 debates wraps up Friday with a debate between Democratic Senator Michael Bennet and Republican challenger Joe O'Dea. That will air at 7 o'clock here on 9 News, live from CSU in Fort Collins. The Democratic candidate for Colorado's newest congressional district is paying herself to run for office. That's not typical, but it's not illegal. Campaign finance records show that Democratic candidate Yadira Caraveo paid herself $44,000 in salary over 5 months. The money comes from contributions made to her campaign to represent the new 8th Congressional District. This is first reported by the conservative website Complete Colorado. A candidate taking a campaign salary for himself or herself is not illegal. Federal election campaign rules allow a candidate to take a salary. That's designed to allow working people, and not just the wealthy, to run for office. The candidate's salary, however, cannot be more than what the candidate earned in income the year before they became candidate, and they have to provide tax records to prove that. In a statement, Caraveo told us in part, quote, "The stakes of this election are too high, so I've stepped away from actively practicing as a pediatrician. I, like many families across the 8th District, cannot go months without a salary." We should note that Caraveo is also drawing a $41,000 a year salary from taxpayers because she's a state representative. Family after family has told us just how hard it is to get help with addiction and mental health. Our Nusha Roy got a hold of some hard numbers about access to that assistance in Colorado. It's not great.
It's a familiar sentence at this point.
We said that mental and behavioral health issues have gotten worse as a result, but also as a symptom of COVID.
Advocates say that means some people who are reaching out for help are met with closed doors. How often is this happening?
And this is bearing that out in the data.
Over the last several years, anywhere from 13 to 16% of people in Denver trying to get help were denied. That means they couldn't get an appointment because there wasn't any space, couldn't afford it, or the wait was too long. And as bad as that sounds, it's better than statewide numbers and national numbers that sit at around 80% of folks who can't get the help when and where they need it. The wait times vary. 73% of folks looking for outpatient substance use disorder treatment from a state licensed facility get same-day approval. At the same time, the CEO of Mental Health Colorado said a family's child who was suicidal was able to get help from crisis services right away, but could not see a psychiatrist for 60 days. Others have waited as long as 30 to 90 days.
What is happening to these folks?
We don't know. Yeah, I think all we know is that, quite possibly their needs are not being met. and they're getting worse.
So DDPHE has put in a larger than usual budget request that would help city staff coordinate services better, understand barriers as they continue to explore other possibilities.
So there may be ways that with this funding, we can step in to be almost like gap insurance, or we could pay additional dollars for certain types of services for certain types of folks that would expand the number of providers that are actually accepting patients that are coming on Medicaid and Medicare. I would want people to understand that there is a system of care out there. It is available, and hopefully it's getting better.
So with this comes the question about beds. The longest waits are for those who need inpatient care. So the city is looking at ways of how do you expand that bed capacity. They're exploring the idea of mixed use, finding beds that can help for a spectrum of needs versus dedicated to just one over the other.
This scramble in different communities of figuring out how they can get creative to pay for this.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation that Denver is having is happening across the state. I mean, you look at parts of rural Colorado where they can only keep a methadone clinic open for a couple of months at a time because they run out of money that quickly. I always have people asking me about Medicaid, and that is an issue here, right? Because Medicaid is covering treatment options, reimbursement rates, not always great for providers. So that's another barrier that's also being addressed. And of course, it's not like overnight you get a whole bunch of providers. That's the other pipeline that's still being worked on.
All right, Anusha, thank you. In the months following the Marshall Fire, the loss of 1,000 homes in Boulder County, I heard from some of the hundreds of Coloradans who lost homes up in the East Troublesome fire in Grand County, because their fire was nearly a year before. It was actually 2 years ago last Friday, and they told me that they felt forgotten these days. Not nearly as much money was raised to help that community, and their rebuilding process has also been painfully slow. That's why this week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports the Grand Foundation's Wildfire Emergency Fund to continue the work that's taken 2 years and will take years more. The nonprofit has distributed more than $3 million generously raised to help the people in that community who lost homes, and also do things like debris removal and restoring the land. 20% of Grand County burned. The nonprofit's honest, though. The money that is remaining at this point is not going to be able to last years more, as their recovery will. There are 366 homes up there destroyed, and rebuilding permits have only been issued for about a third of them so far. Grand County, its people and its landscape have an extensive recovery ahead. Next viewers were a huge part of that initial wave of support for Grand County through a Word of Thanks campaign. The nonprofit Grand Foundation says 3/4 of the initial donations have already gone out to people in need. So I'm asking you tonight if you would consider joining me to let the people of Grand County know that they're not forgotten as they continue on this long road to recovery. Scan the QR code on your screen to get the link to donate, or you can always find it on the next section of 9news.com or on Next Twitter and Facebook accounts. I apologize, the text function is not working for us this week. Try scanning that QR code on the screen with your camera phone if you haven't done it before. Just point, it'll come up, just click on the button. It's really simple. As always with Word of Thanks, I'll match the first 50 viewers to give $5 to get us going. You were there for Grand County after one of the worst fires in Colorado history. As their recovery funds begin to dwindle tonight, I think we can let them know that we remember what they went through, and we're still supporting their efforts to rebuild and to prepare for future fires.
Voters tell pollsters that rising crime is driving their election year decisions. Where those crime stats come from and what they tell us is complicated.
We're not getting exactly the full picture.
And if you find white noise soothing, might I interest you in sound of a different color? It's the expertise of a professor in Colorado. That's next.
If all you listened to were the scary sounding political commercials, you might be afraid to even venture out of your home these days. But how about some facts and some expert context on rising crime? So the FBI released national crime stats earlier this month, and they do show that property crime and violent crime are up in our state. But two experts in criminology told our Steve Steger today they read these crime stats with a grain of salt.
Crime is often an idiosyncratic phenomenon. It can be easy to look at the data released this month by the FBI and draw some major conclusions. It is, after all, the source of those yearly splashy headlines, like listing the most dangerous cities in America.
I think crime statistics can be very useful for policymakers, right? We need to know, where is crime rising? Where is it falling? What type of crimes? What type of victims?
Aya Gruber is a former defense attorney and criminal law professor at CU.
I think that crime statistics have a tendency to trigger cultural narratives that aren't always all that helpful in making decisions in life and can really limit people and make them scared for no reason. They mostly lead you in a direction that is not evidence-informed, but politically informed.
The data from the FBI's Uniform Crime Report shows both violent crime and property crime in Colorado are up year to year and since before the pandemic. Andrea Borrego, the chair of MSU Denver's Criminal Justice Department, warns looking at stats so early can be dangerous.
We're not getting exactly the full picture since we're not going into what's actually being convicted, what's unfounded. And then obviously we just don't know what's not reported.
Both argue this data, and really any data on crime, provides very little context about why crime is committed.
We should always take statistics with a grain of salt, and you want to look more into what is actually happening in your area in particular.
And they warn getting to the root of any problem could take years.
We have a very persistent bias to the present. Like, this is something that is just right now and needs to be solved right now, when really you can look at a lot of these things as long-term trends.
For Next, I'm Steve Stager.
You should also know, this year the FBI changed systems for reporting crime. It now uses a database that provides a lot more information about individual crimes, like demographic data, information about weapons used. Problem is, not every law enforcement agency in the country has the new system, so a lot of them are lagging in adding those numbers.
It was a gorgeous fall day here across downtown Denver. Up in the high country, though, it is looking and feeling more like winter. And all of this coming our way early tomorrow morning. A little bit of light snowfall right now up in and around the Loveland Ski area, the Eisenhower Johnson tunnels. Roads still looking pretty good, but heavier snowfall on the way late tonight. Most of that moisture still confined to the high country, as well as the clouds, the cooler temperatures. Here for the city, we've been monitoring just a couple of isolated showers kind of racing across the urban corridor. All of this picks up in intensity later tonight. Here we are about 11 o'clock. You'll notice the heavier snowfall around Steamboat Springs, all the way to the south around the I-70 mountain corridor. And then overnight, about 3-4 o'clock, we'll start to see some rain showers push in. Temperatures cool off even more by about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And we're talking snow here in Denver and then just off to the south toward the Palmer Divide. Not going to last long, not going to add up all that much. It'll sit in the grassy areas, but by the afternoon with some clearing skies, all that snow long gone. And we're really not talking about a lot of it. Up in the high country, yes, 4 to 8 inches of new snowfall, plus that winter weather advisory that'll continue until about the lunch hour. For us here in the city, I'm thinking about an inch or so, possibly some higher amounts if you live further south and west. However, it has been so warm, so we'll see a lot of melting. As the storm system cruises across Colorado, it'll charge a cold front through, and that's going to drop off our temperatures quite a bit tomorrow. Daytime highs in the 20s and 30s up in the mountains, with 40s and low 50s here in the city. Doesn't last long. Fall is back in action for the weekend with all that sunshine, highs in the low 60s. And how about Halloween? Not too bad for all those trick-or-treaters.
It's the hot new sound hitting eardrums.
So instead of being a high-pitched hiss, it's more of like a low rumble.
The research of a professor from Colorado is finally paying off as America discovers brown noise. That's next.
Noise comes in colors. There's the white noise, which I play in my kids' rooms in a desperate attempt to get them to sleep. But today I learned there's pink noise, purple noise, and brown noise. A professor at Regis University is an expert on the topic of brown noise. It's seeing a spike of interest on social media with talk of possible health benefits.
Yeah. So this basically is sort of a waveform diagram of what white noise looks like. You sort of play all the frequencies that humans can hear kind of all together. Somebody basically said, let's just take a Brownian motion to this and play the high frequency sounds very quiet and the low frequency sounds very loud. And this is what you get when you get brown noise, which sounds more like rumbling thunder, like waves crashing on a beach. My name is Dan Burlow. I'm a professor here at Regis University. I study pharmaceutical sciences, and I have a strong interest in brown noise and how it affects sleep and ADHD. It's called brown noise because the way that they've transformed the frequencies is using a Brownian technique. One of the first things that people really start using it for is something called sound masking or auditory masking. You listen to it when you're trying not to be distracted, whether it's you're sleeping or studying or concentrating, and it just masks out all of the other sounds that might distract you. There is good evidence that kids with ADHD can benefit from white noise and probably brown noise because it's more pleasant. People can actually enjoy listening to that sort of brown noise. It sounds very soothing, and so it's a much more palatable way to sort of get that, what we call an auditory blanket over your brain. You know, like this is nice.
We are letting our neighbors in Grand County know that they're not forgotten 2 years after the worst fire that county's ever seen. That and your feedback next. The East Troublesome fire burned through Grand County 2 years ago last Friday. It took 2 lives, 366 homes, and burned 20% of that county's land. This week, we're working together through Word of Thanks to replenish the recovery funds in Grand County that are running low, with lots of work yet to do. If you scan the QR code on your screen, we'll send you that link to donate to the Grand Foundation's Wildfire Recovery Fund. You can also find the link in the next section of 9news.com or on our Facebook or Twitter account. I apologize, the text link is not working this week. You got to scan that QR code. 3/4 of the original funding, a lot of which you raised through a Word of Thanks campaign 2 years ago, has already gone out. It's been distributed to people in Grand County, but the fact is they have years of recovery ahead. Most of the homes have not been rebuilt. Tonight, we can let the folks in Grand County know that we still stand with them and remember what they are up against. Actually going to skip your feedback for a piece of breaking news that we just got within the last 3 minutes. The district attorney up in Clear Creek County has just announced that they're going to take the shooting death of Christian Glass to a grand jury. That's the case that Steve Steger reported on extensively for Next, the young man who was in a mental health crisis when he was shot by police while sitting in his car up in Clear Creek County. The district attorney is going to take it to a grand jury for the potential of criminal charges against some law enforcement officers involved. I'll have much more on that on 9 News at 9 and 10. See you next time.